The night air clung to Clara's skin as she pushed through the heavy glass doors of St. Alder Hospital, her son's small body burning against her chest. The hospital towered above her like a glittering fortress, its marble and steel reflecting the glow of city lights, daring anyone without wealth or power to step inside. She staggered forward, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floors, the sharp smell of antiseptic cutting through her dizziness. Her boy whimpered, his breath shallow, his eyelids heavy with fever. She pulled the hood of her faded sweatshirt lower over her face, not to hide, but to shield him from the blinding brightness of chandeliers that hung like crystal crowns above the waiting area. The lobby hummed with the soft murmur of privilege. Men in tailored suits tapped their watches impatiently. Women draped in fur and silk scrolled through their phones with manicured fingers, barely glancing at the world beyond their bubbles. Their perfume mingled with the sterile scent of medicine, sweet and suffocating. To them, Clara was nothing more than background noise, a tired woman in worn jeans, clutching a child who looked like he had no business here. She might as well have been invisible. Her legs wobbled as she reached the reception desk. Behind it sat a woman with diamond earrings that sparkled under the fluorescent lights, her smile frozen in the way of someone who had learned to measure a person's worth before offering it. Clara tried to steady her voice, though her throat burned from hours of running, begging, praying. "Please," she whispered, "my son, he needs help." She leaned forward, shifting the boy so his sweat-soaked curls were visible, his lips pale, his little chest rising too quickly. The receptionist's eyes flicked over Clara in a single cold sweep, pausing not on the child, but on the hoodie, the frayed hem of jeans, the sneakers patched at the side. She sighed, typing something into her computer with deliberate slowness. "Do you have premium coverage?" she asked, her tone smooth, rehearsed, merciless. Clara blinked at her, disbelief tightening her chest. "He's burning up. Please, he just needs a doctor." The woman's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Ma'am, without premium insurance, we can't admit him through emergency. Perhaps you should try a community clinic across town. I can give you the address." Her voice was gentle, but the words landed like stones, each one pressing Clara farther into the role of an intruder. The sound of laughter cut through the air. A man in a diamond-studded blazer, lounging nearby with other elites, raised his voice so the whole lobby could hear. "What's this? The charity line opened early tonight?" His companions chuckled, their laughter a sharp contrast to the boy's weak whimper. A starlet draped in mink leaned toward him, her lips curling in amusement. "She probably got lost. These places aren't for people like her." The whispers multiplied, a chorus of mockery. A few patients shifted their designer bags away from Clara, as though poverty itself were contagious. Clara stood in the middle of it all, trembling, not from their cruelty, but from the heat radiating off her son's skin. She brushed a damp curl from his forehead, her hand steady despite the storm around her. She looked up once, meeting the receptionist's gaze. For a heartbeat, her eyes were sharp, unflinching, a warning unspoken. Then she lowered her face again, pressing her lips against her child's hair. "Hold on, baby," she whispered, her voice soft but carrying a strange certainty, as if she knew something the glittering crowd could never guess. The wealthy laughed louder, blind to the storm they had just unleashed. Clara said nothing more. She only held her son tighter and waited. Asterisk, the glass doors hissed shut behind Clara as she stood frozen at the threshold of rejection, her son's weight pressing heavier into her arms with every shallow breath he took. The world inside St. Alder Hospital gleamed like a palace built for kings, but its heart beat cold, deaf to the pulse of desperation. Her chest rose and fell with silent fury, though her face betrayed nothing more than exhaustion. The laughter of the wealthy still echoed, bouncing off the marble walls like cruel bells announcing her exile. And yet she didn't leave. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply adjusted her son in her arms and stepped aside, her silence more unsettling than the ugliest insult hurled at her. Across the street, parked under a flickering streetlight, Marcus sat in the driver's seat of his city bus, gripping the steering wheel as though it could anchor him against the sight he had just witnessed. He had dropped the woman and her sick child off minutes earlier. He had watched her run inside like a soldier charging into battle, only to be shoved back into the cold like trash no one wanted. Marcus should have driven away. His shift was long over, his bones ached from the day, and his daughter was waiting for him at home. But something about the way Clara had carried herself, the dignity she clung to, despite the humiliation, made it impossible to turn the key. He had seen too many faces on too many long nights, but this one burned into him. He shoved his cap back, watching through the windshield as Clara swayed on her feet, her son's fever-lit face pressed against her shoulder. "Lord have mercy," he muttered, his chest tightening. He knew that posture he had once stood outside a clinic with his own baby girl burning up, denied because he couldn't pay up front. His daughter had survived by a miracle. The memory still haunted him, and now, seeing Clara, he felt the same helpless rage climb up his throat. Inside the lobby, the performance of cruelty escalated. The receptionist leaned closer to her microphone, her voice carrying through their intercom. "Security to the front desk. Remove the disturbance." A few of the suited men smirked at the words, as though Clara's agony were a form of theater staged for their amusement. One man tapped his platinum card against the counter rhythmically, chanting softly, "Swipe or leave. Swipe or leave," until others joined in like children mocking a playground victim. Clara stood still, her eyes roaming the polished floor, the gilded ceiling, the smug faces. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. Her hand stroked her son's hair as though the cruel symphony around her didn't matter. But Marcus, now standing just beyond the doors, saw what the rest couldn't, her jaw tight, her gaze calculating, like a predator memorizing every detail of the hunt. The security guards arrived, tall and broad, their navy uniforms sharp against the white walls. One gestured for her to leave, his hand resting on the baton at his side. "Ma'am, this hospital is not for you. Take your child somewhere appropriate." Marcus couldn't take it anymore. He pushed through the doors, his boots heavy on the marble, his voice cutting like thunder. "Are you people blind?" His words ricocheted through the lobby, silencing the laughter for the first time. "That boy is dying in her arms. You're too busy sniffing your diamonds to see it." His eyes locked on the guards, then the receptionist. "You ought to be ashamed. Every last one of you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A billionaire in a silk tie muttered, "Who let the bus driver in?" The starlet giggled nervously, clutching her mink closer. But Clara didn't flinch. She turned her head slightly, just enough to meet Marcus's eyes. For a split second, he saw something that chilled him, a spark of authority. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout to command obedience. She didn't thank him. She didn't tell him to stop. She simply watched, her silence louder than his fury. The guards moved toward Marcus now, not Clara, their focus shifting to the man who dared raise his voice in the sacred halls of privilege. The receptionist's lips twisted with satisfaction. "Remove him." Clara's son stirred weakly in her arms, his tiny hand grasping at her hoodie, his breath ragged. She leaned down and kissed his damp forehead. "Hold on, baby," she whispered again. But this time, her voice was different, lower, sharper, almost a promise. Marcus heard it. He froze mid-protest, suddenly unsure who was saving whom. And as the guards reached for him, Clara finally shifted her weight and stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the room like a blade. Her next words were soft, almost casual, but they carried through the silence like a command. "Put my son on that bed. Now." Every doctor, every nurse, every mocking billionaire stopped breathing for an instant. There was something in her tone, something impossible to ignore. Even Marcus, who had walked into fights with drunk passengers on midnight routes, felt his spine straighten at the sound of it. The storm was no longer outside the ER doors. It was here, in the woman everyone thought was nothing, and none of them knew yet what kind of reckoning they had invited. The marble lobby had gone strangely quiet after Clara's command. The words still hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot, sharp, unexpected, undeniable. The doctors, who had been gliding toward private suites, paused mid-step. A billionaire's mocking grin faltered. Even the security guards froze for a breath, their fists tightening around their batons as though something in her tone had shackled them. And yet, the moment fractured. Laughter broke through again, louder this time, desperate to smother the unease that had crept into the room. The man with the diamond lapel pin barked out a jeer. "Did you all hear that? Our little charity case thinks she's the Queen of St. Alder." He raised his hands theatrically, bowing with mock reverence toward Clara. "Your Majesty, forgive us for not rolling out the red carpet for your hoodie." The crowd rippled with forced chuckles, but beneath the noise there was tension, like an orchestra trying to drown out a note that did not belong. Clara didn't move. She shifted her son gently, brushing his clammy hair from his forehead. His fever had climbed higher. Marcus could see the boy's lips trembling, his breathing uneven, his tiny fingers clinging to Clara's hoodie with desperate strength. Clara's face softened when she looked at him, but when her eyes rose again to the crowd, The softness vanished. They were steady, cutting, unreadable. Marcus had backed a few steps toward her, his chest heaving from the words he had already hurled at the room. He could feel every gaze boring into him like spears, but what unsettled him most was her silence. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't fear. It was waiting, as if she were giving everyone one last chance to reveal who they truly were. Before she decided their fate, the receptionist recovered first. She adjusted her diamond earring and leaned forward over the counter, her voice firm, meant to slice through the chaos. "Ma'am, this is a facility for members with premium insurance. You cannot order staff around here. Please remove yourself before further action is taken." Her words were cold, but Marcus noticed her hand tremble slightly as it gripped the edge of the desk. The doctor stepped closer now, their white coats crisp, monogrammed initials gleaming. One of them, a man with silver hair and a surgeon's arrogance, sneered. "This is a hospital, not a soup kitchen. That boy needs to be treated, yes, but rules exist for a reason. If we make exceptions, chaos follows." Marcus snapped, his fist clenched. "Chaos? Look around you. The only chaos here is your conscience." His voice reverberated, but before the guards could silence him, Clara spoke again quietly, but it cut deeper than any shout. "Chaos is watching a child die while doctors debate his worth." The words landed like a gavel, silencing even the cruel laughter. Marcus felt goosebumps prickle across his arms. The doctors blinked, their smugness faltering, because for the first time they heard the weight behind her voice. Not the exhaustion of a beggar, but the certainty of a judge. Still, the crowd resisted. A Hollywood starlet fanned herself with her silk scarf, smirking at her friends. "She's dramatic. People like her live off sob stories." A ripple of agreement passed through the cluster of billionaires, their mockery reigniting like embers stirred back to flame. But something shifted in the nurses nearby. They had been quiet, standing at the edges, trained to follow protocol. But now Clara's words stirred something different in their eyes. One young nurse glanced at the boy's flushed face and whispered under her breath, "He needs fluids." Now, another bit her lip. Torn between duty to the patient and loyalty to the power that signed her paychecks, Marcus caught it. He saw the way Clara had infected the silence, cracked the walls of obedience with nothing more than her calm defiance. His breath caught in his throat. Who was she? Security advanced again, this time toward both Clara and Marcus, determined to end the spectacle. The diamond-pinned billionaire clapped his hands like a ringmaster in a cruel circus. "Yes, escort them out. Enough of this farce." Marcus braced himself, ready to swing if he had to. But Clara's voice stopped him, low, measured, deadly certain. "Touch him," she said, nodding at her son. "You will regret it." The guards froze mid-step, not because the words were loud, but because they were spoken with the assurance of someone who could make good on them. The crowd stirred uneasily. No one understood yet, but everyone felt it. The boy whimpered in her arms, his fever breaking her silence more than the cruelty of the rich ever could. Clara kissed his damp forehead and whispered once more, "Hold on, baby." Then she lifted her gaze, sweeping it across every sneering face, every diamond earring, every gold watch. For the first time, Marcus saw it fully, the storm behind her calm. She wasn't fighting for permission anymore. She was taking control, and though no one knew her name yet, the marble palace of privilege had already begun to tremble. Asterisk, the boy's breathing grew ragged, each shallow gasp breaking through the tension in the air like a cry from another world. His tiny body trembled in Clara's arms, fever raging, lips pale as if the warmth inside him were burning itself out. The mocking voices, the smug laughter, the diamond-pinned arrogance, all of it faded beneath the undeniable truth of his suffering. Clara's hand pressed gently against his back, steady, unshaken, as though her touch alone might anchor him against the storm threatening to sweep him away. But her eyes, sharp and unyielding, told a different story. Marcus couldn't bear it. His chest heaved, and his voice thundered once more across the marble hall. "This boy is dying right in front of you. How many degrees of fever do you need before you remember your oath?" He jabbed a callous finger at the doctors, his voice a raw blade cutting through the sterile silence. "You swore to heal, didn't you? Or is that only for those who pay your price?" The guards tightened their stance, prepared to drag Marcus away. But something about his fury unsettled them. They shifted uncertainly, glancing toward the doctors, waiting for orders that didn't come. The silver-haired surgeon scoffed, but his voice lacked the same authority as before. "Sir, you're disrupting critical operations. Take the woman and her child and leave before what? Marcus roared, stepping between the guards and Clara, his shoulders squared like a shield. Before you embarrass yourselves further? Before a child dies in your $1 million lobby while you polish your shoes? His voice cracked with rage, and for a moment, the entire hospital seemed to hold its breath. Clara didn't stop him. She stood silent, her son pressed against her chest, her gaze locked on the staff who dared to ignore his suffering. She didn't plead for Marcus's protection. She didn't shrink behind him. Instead, she studied every face: receptionist, surgeon, guard, billionaire, her memory etching them like stone tablets. She was not begging for mercy. She was building a ledger. The boy convulsed suddenly, his small body jerking in Clara's arms. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Even the billionaires flinched, their laughter turning to uneasy murmurs. The young nurse who had whispered earlier stepped forward instinctively, medical instinct surging stronger than fear. "He needs an IV right now," she said, her voice trembling but urgent. The receptionist shot her a warning glare. "Stay in your lane," but Clara's eyes snapped to the nurse, and for the first time, her lips curved into the faintest smile like a queen recognizing loyalty among traitors. "Do it," she said softly. Not a plea, an order. The nurse hesitated, trembling, her gaze darting between her superiors and Clara. The silver-haired doctor barked, "Don't touch that child without authorization." And then Clara's voice rang out, calm and absolute. "I am the authorization." The words were simple, but the weight behind them dropped like thunder in the hall. The mocking smiles faltered. The starlet's hand stilled on her scarf. Even Marcus turned his head sharply, struck by the authority threaded through every syllable. Who was this woman? Security stepped forward again, rattled but determined, and Marcus braced himself to fight. But before they could reach her, Clara's son let out a weak, strangled cry, and Clara raised her voice sharp, commanding, undeniable. Put my son on that bed. Now, the hall fell into a stunned hush. For the first time, it wasn't just Marcus who obeyed her presence. The crowd itself stilled, as if something larger than fear had gripped them. The young nurse moved without waiting for permission, rushing toward Clara with a rolling cart. A few gasped at her defiance, but she ignored them, eyes fixed on the boy. The silver-haired doctor fumed, his authority slipping through his fingers. "You'll lose your license for this." But Clara didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She leaned down, whispering into her son's ear, steady and sure. "Hold on, baby. Just a little longer. They'll know soon enough." Marcus heard the words and felt a chill crawl down his spine. They weren't words of desperation anymore. They were prophecy. The guards, rattled and uncertain, exchanged glances. The billionaires muttered in confusion. The receptionist's diamond earring caught the light as she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. None of them understood, not yet, but the balance of power had already tilted. Clara's silence had been their mistake, her patience, their undoing. And now, as her child lay trembling in her arms, the storm she had been holding back was only moments from breaking. The fortress of privilege had cracks, as she was about to tear it wide open. Their lights glared like judgment from the ceiling as Clara's words echoed, still reverberating in the sterile air. "Put my son on that bed." Now, for a heartbeat, the entire lobby seemed suspended, trapped between disbelief and something darker, and instinctive recognition that this woman, wrapped in a battered hoodie, spoke with a power no one could dismiss. The young nurse pushed forward first, unable to ignore the boy's labored breathing. She grabbed the nearest gurney, her sneakers squeaking against polished marble, and guided it toward Clara. Gasps rose from the crowd. The billionaire with the diamond lapel pin leapt to his feet, pointing an accusatory finger. "Stop her. This is madness. This woman doesn't belong here. If you give her child a bed, what's next? Open the doors to every beggar in California." His voice cracked at the edges, desperation bleeding through arrogance. But no one laughed with him this time. Clara lowered her son onto the gurney with the tenderness of a sculptor handling fragile stone. She brushed damp curls from his forehead, her movements calm, controlled, while chaos rippled around her. The nurse hooked up the four with trembling hands, sweat forming at her temples as she defied her superiors. The silver-haired doctor stormed forward, his monogrammed coat billowing like a judge's robe. "You will stop this now," he barked, seizing the line. "You don't get to dictate treatment, Emir." His voice carried decades of authority, but Clara's eyes met his with a stillness that silenced him mid-motion. "She asked softly. It wasn't a question. It was a scalpel. Her voice sliced through the marble hall, leaving the surgeon standing stiff. His hand trembling around the floor he no longer dared to pull. Marcus stood behind her, fists clenched, torn between outrage and awe. Every instinct screamed at him to fight the guards closing in. But Clara's presence radiated such gravity that he hesitated. She didn't need his fists. She didn't need anyone's rescue. She was commanding a battlefield no one else had realized they were standing on. The receptionist's voice quivered as she spoke again, but the venom in her tone remained. This is a violation of protocol. You're jeopardizing this hospital's integrity. Security, remove them both. The guards advanced. Marcus planted himself between them and Clara, his chest broad, his voice like thunder. You'll have to go through me first. But before the guards could act, Clara finally rose to her full height. Her hoodie slipped slightly, revealing a glimpse of something metallic, a badge clipped to her waistband, half hidden until now. For a fleeting second, the emblem caught the light. The young nurse gasped, recognition flashing in her eyes, but no one else seemed to notice. Clara adjusted the hoodie again, deliberately concealing it. Not yet. Not while her son still burned with fever. She wanted them to show their faces first, the cruelty, the arrogance, the corruption. Her silence was their trap, and they were walking into it blindly. Her son whimpered, his small hand clutching her wrist. She bent low, whispering in his ear, "Hold on, baby. Just a little longer. Mama's almost done." The words were intimate, but they rippled outward, unsettling the room. It was as if she wasn't just speaking to her son, but to the entire fortress of privilege, promising them that their reckoning was near. The silver-haired surgeon's face twisted, his pride shattered by her defiance. "Enough," he snarled. "You think you can walk in here with your rags and dictate how this hospital runs? Who do you think you are?" Clara's eyes didn't waver. Her lips parted, not in anger, but in something colder certainty. "You'll know soon enough." The crowd stirred uneasily. Billionaires shifted in their leather chairs, suddenly unsure whether they were watching a beggar's tantrum or a queen's coronation. The receptionist's manicured fingers hovered over her keyboard, trembling as though typing might protect her. Even the guards hesitated, their boots rooted to the marble floor. Dot and Marcus, standing close enough to hear the steady rhythm of Clara's breath, felt his heart pound. He had stepped in to defend her, certain she was powerless. But now, watching her command the room without raising her voice, he realized the truth. He wasn't her protector. He was her witness. The fevered boy stirred weakly, and Clara kissed his forehead again. The fourth dripped steadily, the young nurse working quickly, her courage bolstered by Clara's calm authority. For the first time, the child's breathing slowed, a fragile thread pulling him back from the edge, and in that moment, Clara finally lifted her gaze to the ceiling-high windows of St. Alder's lobby, where the city lights gleamed against the glass. Her voice carried, steady and clear, echoing through the hall that had mocked her. "This hospital belongs to me." The words cracked like lightning across a storm sky. Shock slammed into the crowd. The receptionist's jaw dropped. The surgeon froze. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The fortress of privilege had just learned it was no longer their asterisk. The words seemed to hang in the air long after Clara had spoken them. "This hospital belongs to me." They didn't sound like a boast. They didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like fact, like law. For a moment, the marble palace of privilege stood still. The chandelier above flickered faintly, as if even the lights hesitated. No one moved. The young nurse froze mid-motion, the fur needle still pressed into the child's tiny vein. The receptionist's manicured hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling as though afraid to type another word. Billionaires shifted in their velvet chairs, the smug confidence drained from their faces. The silver-haired surgeon laughed too loud, too forced, the sound of a man desperate to regain control. "This is absurd," he barked, his voice echoing across the sterile lobby. "She's delusional. A woman like that doesn't own anything here. She's trying to trick us." He turned toward the crowd, seeking their approval, but the applause didn't come. His laughter fell flat against the silence. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply reached into the folds of her hoodie, her movements calm, deliberate, unstoppable. From beneath the worn fabric, she pulled a black leather wallet, its edges polished by years of use, and snapped it open. The golden emblem of Alder Global Healthcare glared beneath the fluorescent lights. The crest, embossed in authority, was unmistakable. Two intertwining serpents of medicine wrapped around a torch, stamped with the signature of power. Below it, the title burned in bold letters, Clara W. Alden, chairwoman. The receptionist gasped audibly, her diamond earring catching the light as her face drained of color. The surgeon staggered back a step, words collapsing in his throat. A billionaire choked on his glass of sparkling water, the fizz spilling onto his suit. Even the guards, men trained about to no one but their paychecks, froze like statues caught in a lightning storm. Marcus's jaw fell open. He had stood ready to throw fists, to drag Clara and her son back out into the night if he had to. He thought he had been the protector, but now he realized he was standing in the presence of the woman who owned the very empire that had humiliated her. Clara's voice was calm, but it reverberated with a deadly certainty. "Every paycheck you collect," she said, eyes locked on the receptionist, "has my signature at the bottom. Every wing of this hospital," she turned her gaze to the surgeon, "was built under my watch. And every patient you treat, whether billionaire or beggar, is supposed to be protected. Under the charter I wrote with my own hands." She stepped forward, her son resting on the gurney, the ferdrip finally doing its quiet work. The crowd parted like a sea before her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And yet tonight, she continued, "My child was denied care because of his hoodie. Because of me." Gasps rippled across the lobby. The billionaires who had mocked her moments ago shrank back in their seats, their faces pale with shame. A starlet who had giggled earlier covered her mouth, her mink wrap sliding from her shoulders. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. He looked at Clara not as a desperate mother anymore, but as something else entirely. A storm wearing human skin, a reckoning cloaked in denim and cotton. The silver-haired surgeon tried again, his arrogance fraying at the edges. "And Madam Chairwoman, if you'd only told us who you were." Clara's eyes cut to him, sharp as glass. "If I had to tell you, then you've already failed." Her words struck harder than any slap. A child's life is not measured in premiums or surnames. And tonight, you prove that every luxury you polish in these halls is rotting at the core. The young nurse's hands trembled, but Clara turned to her, her gaze softening just for an instant. "You did what none of them dared. Remember this moment, because tomorrow, this hospital will be yours to rebuild." The nurse's eyes widened, her chest heaving as though a crown had just been placed on her shoulders. Clara faced the rest of them now, doctors, nurses, billionaires, guards, all bowing beneath the weight of her silence. "You are dismissed," she said, her voice steady, final. "All of you who turned your backs tonight are finished. Effective now." The lobby erupted in chaos. The receptionist sputtered, "Why, you can't just—" Before Clara's raised hand silenced her, guards lowered their eyes, stepping back as though retreating from a battlefield they knew they had lost. The surgeon's face twisted with disbelief, his career crumbling before his eyes. The billionaires who had jeered tried to slip out quietly, but their footsteps echoed against the marble, betraying their shame. Marcus stood rooted, his pulse hammering in his ears. He realized what he was witnessing wasn't just a firing, it was a cleansing, a judgment, a public reckoning delivered in the very temple of wealth and privilege. As Clara turned back to her son, her hand resting gently on his forehead. His breathing had steadied, faint color returning to his cheeks. Her eyes softened, though the storm in her voice remained. "Hold on, baby," she whispered again, but this time, the words weren't only for him. They were for the city outside, for every forgotten soul who had been turned away by doors like these. The fortress of privilege had fallen to its knees, and the storm had only just begun. The marble lobby of St. Alder no longer hummed with superiority, it trembled under silence. A silence heavy with shame, dread, and awe. Where moments ago billionaires had laughed and doctors had sneered, now heads hung low. The storm had arrived, and her name was Clara W. Alden. Her son lay on the gurney beside her, color returning to his cheeks with each drop of the four. She smoothed his hair with a gentleness that clashed with the fire in her eyes. Her gaze swept across there, and no one dared to meet it. The receptionist, who had dismissed her, sat pale and rigid, her diamond earrings suddenly vulgar against her hollow expression. The silver-haired surgeon clutched his stethoscope like a lifeline, but even his decades of arrogance could not shield him now. Marcus stood nearby, heart pounding. He had thought himself a fighter, a protector, but he understood now he was not the shield. He was the witness, a bus driver who had stepped into a storm far larger than himself, and who would now carry the memory of this night for the rest of his life. Clara straightened slowly, her hoodie still clinging to her shoulders like battle armor. Her voice carried through the marble chamber, not loud, but sharp and deliberate. "Tonight, I was shoved out of these doors like a beggar. My son was mocked for being born to the wrong woman in the wrong clothes. You all thought me powerless, invisible, and yet every paycheck you cash, every polished wing you parade, belongs to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A billionaire cleared his throat, desperate to salvage his dignity. Chairwoman, surely this can be reconsidered. Perhaps a reprimand, not silence. Clara's single word cut through him like glass. He sank back into his chair, face burning with shame. She turned, locking eyes with the receptionist. You saw a mother with a dying child and chose diamonds over duty. You are dismissed. The woman's lips parted in protest, but Clara's glare froze her tongue. Security, suddenly loyal to the real power in the room, moved toward the desk. Her gaze shifted to the silver-haired surgeon. You were trusted with lives, not bank accounts. Tonight, you weighed my son's worth against his clothes. You are finished. His face collapsed, color draining, decades of reputation crumbling in a single sentence. She swept her gaze over the nurses and residents clustered at the edges. And you, those who stood silent while cruelty reigned, you will answer for that silence. But those who acted, her eyes softened as they found the young nurse still at the gurney, adjusting the four. You remembered why these halls exist. You will lead here when they are gone. Tears filled the nurse's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. Reporters had gathered at the edge of the lobby now, cameras flashing as word of the scene spread. Clara didn't shy from them. She turned, her son's hand clutched gently in hers, and faced the lenses that would carry her words across the nation. This hospital belongs not to the wealthy, not to the privileged, but to the people. Tonight I witnessed the sickness that festers in its heart: greed, arrogance, blindness. And tonight, it ends. The billionaires fidgeted. The dismissed staff lowered their eyes. The cameras clicked furiously, recording every syllable. Clara bent low, kissing her son's forehead. His breathing had steadied now, his tiny chest rising with newfound strength. Then she rose, her voice carrying one final decree, effective immediately. This is under reform. Every hand that turned a mother away tonight will never serve here again. Every patient who walks through these doors, no matter their insurance, no matter their clothes, will be treated. This is not a fortress for the elite. This is a sanctuary for the sick. And if any of you doubt me, remember what you saw tonight. The words cracked like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then the cameras erupted, reporters shouting questions, flashes exploding like lightning. Clara didn't wait for their applause, their panic, their justifications. She turned back to her son, brushing his cheek, her face softening in a way that only Marcus, standing close, could see. Marcus's throat tightened. He had seen corruption before, cruelty before, but never a storm wielded with such calm. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "You've changed everything." Clara looked at him then, her eyes steady, her voice low. "No, he did," she said, nodding toward her son. "I only reminded them what it means to see." Outside, the night city buzzed, unaware that history had just been rewritten inside those marble walls. But the witnesses would tell it: the bus driver, the nurse, the reporters. A story of a woman in a battered hoodie who walked into a palace of privilege and tore it down with nothing but truth. And when the sun rose over St. Alder Hospital, the world would no longer see a fortress of the elite. They would see the empire of a mother who refused to let her child be invisible.